All right, I'm going to go ahead and set up number 1. If you're still working on number 2, that's fine. You want to substitute those numbers in one at a time. Let's see. So there are 2 negative 2's, but I'm not going to repeat it. So I like to put them in order from smallest to biggest. Goes with negative 6. Okay, so that first one is not a function. I cannot have one input have 2 different answers. Each input should only have one distinct answer. Okay? So the mapping diagram, you do not want 2 arrows coming off of one number on the input side. It's okay to have multiple arrows go to the same number on the output side, as long as you just have, one arrow coming through. Okay, so that's what the mapping diagram is useful for. You could also scan through these, and when I see the same input, do I have the same output? 3 and 5. Okay, so that's another thing that you could look for, but that mapping diagram is a quick way to get there. Okay, let me give you about a minute or two. Domain, you're substituting in one by one, and then your range, put it in order from smallest to biggest. Use these brackets as you do that, okay? So if you need a minute or two, and substitute those in. Okay, so on your range, you're taking your 3 domain values. So this notation means whatever the input is, you substitute it in here and determine condense that expression, or do the math. That's your output. So this first one here, this would be negative 12 plus 1. So that gives me a negative 11. So when I plug in negative 3 as a domain, one of the outputs is negative 11. 4 and 5 is 20. So this one would be 21. And then this is going to be 40 plus 1, so 41. So if I was trying to keep them together as ordered pairs, I could do negative 3 comma negative 11, 5 comma 21, and so forth. But I would like us to write the range. So because the domain is provided like this, you're going to write your range with these symbols and go ahead and do smallest to biggest. Actually, it looks like they came out smallest to biggest. They don't always do that, where you get small, the middle, and then the next one up. So your range, so -11, 21, and 41. Okay? So input, output, that is called function notation. So it's just a way to preserve what number I plugged in versus just having y equals -11. Well, then you have to go back and say, well, what did I plug in to get -11? Okay, so it's just another way of writing x and y. Okay, does anybody have any questions on either of those? Or does anyone want to go back to anything from Monday and Tuesday? I think today we'll continue to see a little bit more. We'll talk more domain and range, so hopefully it just sort of kind of cycles through and we pick up older stuff as we learn new stuff. Okay. Well, we are going to need our notes packet. So if you guys want to find day 3 in here, it's really the last lesson, and then there's a couple of worksheets we'll use with that. Okay, so day 3. And it should be page 9. I spelled domain wrong. You might want to fix that. I just noticed that yesterday. Not domain, whatever that word is I typed. So, domain, range, and evaluate functions is what we're going to do today. Okay, so I have a couple of examples on the front, and then we're going to look at some graphs. We're going to see interval notation again, like we saw last unit with the brackets and parentheses to the infinities, negative infinities, things like that. Okay, so that was something that was a little bit unclear first unit. Hopefully, that when you see it again today, it'll start to click a little bit. Okay, so we are going to start with having an equation. So this time I just have y equals 5x minus 8 instead of the f of x. So we're going to find the range given that domain. We're going to write the function as a set of ordered pairs. And then we're going to rewrite it as a mapping diagram. Okay, so I want you to see kind of multiple perspectives here. So this is really like what we did in the warm-up. So I'm basically saying that these are my x's that I'm going to plug in. And I just want to one by one plug that in and figure out the y's. And then when I write my range, let's just write smallest to biggest. Okay? So it depends, however you want to work. If you want to kind of plug them all in at once, you can. So I can say y equals 5. I'll plug the -5 in. I'll just plug them all in to begin with and then kind of work through. Second one would be y equals 5, plug in 1, minus 8. And then the last one is a 3. So go ahead and simplify those. But we're just substituting in one at a time is really what we're doing. Okay. Negative 33, negative 37. So you're matching on that? Okay. So in order to finish, we will just use our same notation here. So these are in order again. So negative 33 is the smallest. Negative 3 is a little bit bigger. And then 7. Okay. Negative 3, not 7 is next. Okay. So that would be your range. All right. So again, input, output, just getting used to new vocabulary. So there's multiple ways to see those. Now let's put it back together in an ordered pair. Okay, ordered pair looks like parentheses, x comma y. So let's just bring these back together, input with its corresponding output. So I plugged in a negative 5, I got a negative 33. Okay, so we're just going to bring them back together in a new format. Not a new format, but a different format. 1 got plugged in, we got negative 3. And then we plugged in a 3, and the output was a 7. Okay, so a different way to write the exact same information, input, output, domain, range, together in one ordered pair. Okay, and then finally, let's just make that mapping diagram. Okay, just again, just to show what that looks like. Make sure that when you hear the word mapping, that you're coming to that visual of those two ovals. So I would go smallest to biggest. So 5, 1, and 3. Oops, that's biggest to smallest. Oh, negative 5, sorry. Negative 5, 1, 3. Okay, there's your inputs. And then negative 33, negative 3, and 7 were the outputs. Positive 3. Right? No, negative 3. Gosh, 7. And so we had, since they were kind of in order, smallest to biggest, our arrows end up not crossing through each other. So again, a function, one input plus one output. But really, that whole problem is just showing the same exact thing 3 different ways. Okay? All right. Anyone have any questions or need to kind of clear anything up? Because I want to have you guys try that on the bottom equation. Same set of directions, although I give you a different function. So go ahead and start that bottom one. And I'll jump in and kind of work through a little bit of it with you. But as you're working, if you have questions, just let me know. Okay, I want to talk about -2 because this throws people sometimes when you're working through this. So calculators are great, but they're only as good as what you're entering. So if you kind of work this out mentally, -2 squared, so working through PEMDAS, exponents first, -2 squared is 4. -2 times the second -2. Then I'm going to multiply by the -3 in front. So this will give me a -12. And then -12 and 7, -5. Okay, now if you were to use a calculator and not, sometimes I see people type this. If you don't have, you're trying to square a negative and you don't put it in parentheses, your calculator thinks this is what you want to do. What your calculator does is it separates the negative from the 2 and rewrites it or reprograms it like this. -1 times 2 squared. Well, 2 squared is 4. Then it's going to multiply by the -1 it's separated to get -4. When what you're really wanting it to do is take the -2 and multiply it by another -2, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So just be aware of that. If you're wanting to use your calculator, that's fine, but make sure that you are, when you substitute in, or anytime I substitute in, I always put parentheses. Do the same thing if you're using a calculator, okay? So that first one will give you -5. The positive values, when you square them, shouldn't be a problem, okay? But just kind of be aware on whatever calculation method you use. Okay, so your range, -41 is the smallest, then the -5, then the 7. So on your squaring, just, you're going to do it little by little. That last one, Aiden, you're looking at? Okay, go ahead, let's go ahead and finish the second part and the third part. Okay, take your domain and range and do your ordered pairs. So I just put things usually in order, input, output, domain and range, one arrow coming off of each. Okay, so again, just sort of three different visual representations of the same thing. Domain and range separate, ordered pairs together, and then we've got this mapping diagram. Okay, anybody have any questions? We're going to do a little bit more of this in a minute. Anything to go over before we kind of move on to graphs? Okay. Well, if you guys are turning the page, we're going to look at domain and range from a graph this time versus just numbers here. Okay, so we're going to look for domain and range. We're going to use interval notation here. So when you're looking for domain, you're thinking, since I'm on a coordinate plane where I have an x and a y axis, domain represents all of the x's that exist on the graph. And when I say graph, I'm talking about what's graphed. This is a U-shaped graph. Here's kind of a sideways U. That's what I'm saying when I say graph. Range, let's look for all the possible y's. So what you want to focus on is I'm focusing left to right when I'm looking at domain, okay? So what I'm looking at is, so remember if I put a dot here, this ordered pair is 0, 3. So the x coordinate of that dot is the 0 on the x-axis. Okay, so I'm kind of looking at how far left or right does that graph go. And so since there are not arrowheads on the end, it stops at those circles. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to put a vertical line here to show me that the smallest x value is sitting at -1. I'm going to put another vertical line here. So this U, when I'm looking at the x's, is spanning this opening right here. Because this point is at -1, this point is at +1. Okay, so if I see that, you want to visually kind of look. Where is the line or the curve going left to right? So I see an open circle and a closed circle. So remember, we got parentheses and brackets. So this is on the x, -1, and it's open. So it doesn't exactly pick up -1 if it picks up just close to it. So we want a parenthesis for an open circle, a bracket if it's colored in. So -1 is my smallest x, and the U dips down and stops over here. And on the x-axis, that coordinates with +1. So comma 1. It is closed, so I get a bracket. So I'm saying I kind of have tunnel vision from left to right. Domain. On the x-axis, left to right. Okay, now I'm going to change my perspective on y, because the y-axis goes up and down. I want to look from bottom to top. Okay, so I'm going to erase these lines. I'll just maybe switch colors. Okay, here's my y-axis. So I want to know where does the curve, what's the smallest y value? Okay, so I'm kind of changing my lines like this. So it dips down and goes back up. So this is the smallest it reaches. There's no arrow, so it's not going on forever. It's stopping right here. Okay, so I'm looking at from here to here, y values. Smallest y value is 3, and it's part of the curve, so it picks up 3. So that's a bracket, it is included. And then it stops up here, which is at 5. So even though I have an open here, this is closed. So 5 is part of the range because I have it picked up somewhere on the curve. So I want another bracket. Okay, so domain, I'm looking left to right. Range, I'm looking down to up, I guess I should say. All right. Okay, how can I tell if this is a function? What was the other test from yesterday? We did the mapping diagram, and then there was a test we did on graphs to see. You know, remember what it's called or how we would find it? flip back a page. Yeah, go back a page. Back to page 7. And then toward the middle and bottom where you have that graph at the bottom. We had a vertical line test from yesterday. So vertical line test means I should be able to draw a vertical line. If it goes anywhere through on the graph more than once, it is not a function. So if I kind of look here, I could, no matter where I move my vertical line, it's only going to touch one time. So that's good. That means it is a function. So this does pass the vertical line test. I mean, so you can even put one on there, you know, just to show that it touches once. Okay. So I don't need to do a mapping diagram. I can just do the vertical line test. So that's kind of the alternative to it. Okay, I want you to try domain, range, and function on number 2. Okay. It helps you to kind of draw those lines. You're thinking X's and you're thinking Y's. So the arrows, you're thinking, you know, it's going like this forever. So it's going to infinity on the domain. So it's starting here, the smallest x value is 0. It's going this way forever. So smallest is 0, and it's a continual curve. There's no openings anywhere, so it's a bracket. And then it's going forever. And infinities always are parentheses. okay, because we can't quite define what infinity is. So think left to right on domain, down to up on range. Okay, so on my range now, I'm going to get rid of these. I don't want to look left to right. I want to look from the bottom to the top. Oh, wait a minute. A couple of you I talked to, it's not the 3's. I don't know what I was thinking. 3 is not part of the range. Threw me for a minute. If this was like, if it were like this, circle or closed circle and closed circle, my range would be -3 to +3. Okay? But what's happening, remember, these are going slightly out and up, 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 up forever, down. So it's continually going that way forever. So when it's pointing, it's going to be going down to -infinity eventually and going all the way up to +infinity eventually. So your range, -infinity to +infinity. So envision that going to the left, and then it just gets wider and wider, and eventually it's going to point all the way down and all the way up. Okay? But because our graph just stops there, it kind of looks like it also stops. So vertical line test on this fails. Okay, so this is not a function. Okay, you can even draw one, fails right here. Okay, so not a function. So we're going to work more on this today. I'm going to have you guys work more on that for an assignment, so we can continue to go over that. Okay. Some questions on those 2 domain and range? Those are a little tricky. That'll take some practice. Okay, let's finish up just some more practice with evaluating functions in this new function notation. So I have h of x equals -6x plus 8. I want you to evaluate what is h of -2 and what is h of 5. So how do you evaluate those? What are you going to do to find your answer? Like h of -2. What are you going to start with to calculate? Okay, you're already writing something. What are you going to do on h of -2? How are you going to get to your answer?
I am going to multiply by -6 and end up with 12 plus 8.
Okay, so you're plugging it in, right? So you're substituting, remember, this is your x value, you're plugging in, exactly, yeah. Okay, so go ahead and substitute those in, and we're going to just work a little bit more on calculating, just making sure we're accurately getting those answers. And you're welcome to go on to number 6. I'll jump in and do number 5 here in a minute or 2. So again, whatever calculator you're using, a calculator, that's fine. Just make sure, while you're using it in class, if you have questions, let me know. If you're not sure you're getting a different answer than me, we can talk about, how your calculator works. Or you can do it mentally, that's fine as well. Okay, I'm getting 20 when I plug in -2, okay? And I'm getting -22 when I plug in 5. So 20 and -22 would be your 2 answers. Okay, try number 6. It does have that x squared in it. So remember what we talked about earlier when plugging negatives in and you're squaring them. So go ahead and simplify that second one. a -15 and a 20. And so when you square that -5, make sure you're getting a negative or positive 25, not a negative 25. Okay, so I would write, I usually write several steps down as I calculate through it. That way I am, making sure I'm not skipping a step. Okay, so evaluating functions. This is kind of the last major part of this kind of small unit. Okay, so I'm going to have you guys do some practice, and I have them in this packet versus on Schoology today. So I'd like you to do two things. So if you would flip the page, the next page is so domain, range, worksheet 1. Actually, I need us to cross them out. But this is like the examples we just did. So I want us just to get some more practice. And then I also want you to look at the next page. I'd like you to work through those problems. It's like the first example we did, where we're evaluating, doing some mapping, making some tables, things like that. And then that's it. That very last page we'll do tomorrow in class, kind of a review activity. But I would like you to do both of these. So let me look up, I wanted you to cross them out, because the domain and range is a little bit weird. We're not going to get into that. Let me find my paper. Oh, okay. Actually, I will write it up here. I've got it. Okay, so on number 1, cross out number 1. I mean, you can do them if you want, but just, I don't want to confuse you. Cross out number 5. And then number 11. Okay, so just skip those 3 as I was working through them. I didn't want it to be, I know it's already a little confusing, I didn't want it to be more confusing. Okay, so we will check over that tomorrow. We do have some time, you guys can work on that, but I want to return your Unit 1 test to you and let you look at it. You can retake tests, any test, okay? So if you're interested, talk to me, because there's a little bit of information I want to give you. You don't have to retake the whole thing. So, maybe the inequalities threw you off. So what I'm going to do, if you want to retake it, I'm going to fill a form out that kind of gives you your score by section. So you can see, okay, I had 100% on the solving equations section. I don't need to worry about that. But maybe I had 30% on the inequalities. Okay, so you can do sections of it. And then I will also give you like a little bit of practice. Okay. The major problem right now with that is I have to be gone all of next week. So if you need to retake it, we won't be able to get to it until the following week. But you can, if you want to retake it, let me know. I will make sure the sub gives you that information next week that you might want to start looking at. But we'll find time to do it, even if it's delayed just a little bit. Okay. So let me hand that back to you. I will collect these back from you though. So we've got about 10 minutes if you want to take a look at it during that time. And feel free to have questions on anything. Let me know if you're not sure why it was wrong. Yeah.